ever since humans have been using language, we have been telling stories. It may have started around campfires, but from parent to child, from friend to friend, from nation to nation, we have been using stories to connect ourselves to a greater understanding of each other and of our reality. And if you think about it, it is these stories that we tell that open up worlds, they open up realities, they foster beliefs, they communicate all kinds of things. The most important stories that we tell are the ones that we tell to ourselves about ourselves. They're based on our view of the world, our beliefs, our thinking. But those stories that we tell ourselves can be liberating, or they can be imprisoning. They can be restrictive and narrow and cause continual pain. If you think about it, think about someone who's anorexic. They weigh 98 pounds soaking wet. And what do they believe about themselves? That they are fat. Think about somebody who, well, besides an anorexic, the other example was, this is the problem with having the paper so close. Yes, think about somebody who has $1 million in the bank, free and clear. They might think they're poor, and if they are telling themselves that story, then what are they? Poor. Marcus Aurelius, who was a Stoic philosopher and an emperor of the empire about 150 years before Jesus was born, said this: "If you are distressed by anything external, the pain is not due to the thing itself, but to your estimate of it. And this you have the power to revoke at any moment." And I like that, because what this says to me is our estimate about the thing or about the event or about the condition is something that's changeable. It's a belief, and beliefs are changeable. I think there are probably many people in this room who've engaged in the spiritual practice of unraveling a belief. You go, wow, I believe this. I'm telling my story about this. What does that mean? Oh, that means I have a belief about this. Oh, that means I have a belief about this. And you start coming down, and pretty soon you're at the root of your story. You're at the root of your discomfort. You're at the root of your joy, all because you've traced it back. So this is the good news. The good news is the story is only true as long as we believe it. The story is only true until it's not. The story is only true until we think another thought. So if we think that we're unlovable and we've told the story that we're unlovable, that's the reality that we've created, we can change our minds and create a new reality. If the story we've told about ourselves is that we don't have enough willpower to stop smoking or stop drinking or stop overeating, if we've had that story, the good news is we can change the story and have a different kind of reality. I think I've told you once, and maybe I've told you 100 times. Hopefully you don't have too much projection and baggage with that phrase. Some people, they hear that from their mother. I've told you once, I've told you 1,000 times. So if I've told you once, I've told you only 100 times. If we want to change our lives, we need to change our thinking. And that's principle, mind, idea, expression. It's basic unity, but mind, idea, expression is the principle, and the way we apply it when it comes to our story is this. Number one, identify your story. And in identifying your story, all you have to do is listen to yourself. Is there a common theme? Is there a common denominator in your story? Are you finding yourself saying, gosh, that postal clerk at the post office was so rude. That waitress in the restaurant was so rude. That grocery cashier at Harris Teeter was so rude. What's the common denominator? Yeah, usually when you're pointing out, there's a whole lot more fingers pointing back. But it's a notice. Identify your story. Another way to identify your story is to listen to yourself by noticing, gee, do I have a consciousness of catastrophe? Do I find myself saying over and over again, that'll never work? I've tried that before. That'll never fly. That's an accident waiting to happen. Or perhaps when I listen to myself, I find myself making assumptions and judgments. Assumption and judgments actually marginalize the people that we're in relationship with. They compartmentalize them and they help keep them small. Have you ever found yourself going, oh yeah, Jane, she's always late. Or, oh yeah, Joe, he's a loser. Right? Have you ever just like every time you think of somebody, you go, God, what a loser. Or, I mean, you not only cement yourself, but you cement the way that in the story that you relate with them. My mother complained all the time about me being late. It didn't matter if I was late, if I was on time, or I was early. She would complain about me being late. So eventually I gave up. It was a no-win situation. I might as well be late. So the way we're making assumptions or making judgments about people is part of our story. And then finally, a way to listen to yourself and identify your own story is by taking a look at what you lead with. What do you start with when you come into contact with other people? What do you start with when people ask you to tell them about yourselves? Nikki's program in her graduation from ministerial school, in the program they gave each ordinand a single page to tell their story, to introduce themselves. And one of the ordinands started with, I'm divorced. That's what she was leading with. She didn't ask me to coach her, but that's what she was leading with, was I'm divorced. And when I started thinking about that, we've done this since little kid days. When we're little kids, our entire world is school. It's not only the center of our academic life, it's the center of our social life. It's the center of our extracurricular life, whether it be athletics or science club or poetry club. School is the center of our life. And when my older son, Mark, was little, he used to say, hi, my name is Mark, I'm dyslexic. That's what he led with because he went to a school for gifted and dyslexic kids. And then when he got into 9th grade, he went to a different school. He got accepted to a performing arts program that was integrated into their school. And he would say, hi, my name is Mark, I'm a dancer. So my question to you is, what are you leading with? What's your story? And how are you presenting yourself to the world? That's step one. Step two is to determine whether or not your story is empowering you. And you can look at these different areas of your life and ask yourself, how are the stories that I'm telling about my health empowering my highest and best in my body? My physical body, my emotional body, my mental body. How are the stories empowering me? And is there anything that I could pay attention to? Or number two is finances. How are the stories I'm telling about the flow of money in my life, the way material goods move in and through me? Are there any leaks that I need to attend to? Number three is relationships. How are my relationships with other people? What are the stories I tell about my relationships? Am I easy to make friends with? Do I find it easy to relate to my family or my neighbors or the people in my world? And is there anything I need to clean up here? Career and creative self-expression. What are my holy purpose? How am I living my spiritual gifts? How am I living my genius? Am I living on purpose? Do I need to open myself to be more on target with my genius in the world? And then finally, the spiritual and personal stories. What are we telling ourselves about our relationship with ourselves and with God? Are we as expansive with God as we can be? Are we living on the very edge of our lives? This is probably the most critical place. Are the stories that we're telling ourselves about our spiritual and personal growth or career, relationships, finances, health, are those stories empowering us? And if they are, well, that's the determination. Are they? And then create a different story. Because if they are, I venture to say we could go into meditation, dig a little deeper, and expand a little more. We can improve our story. If our story is crummy, get rid of it. That's the past. We can get a new story. And if our story is something that used to really serve us and doesn't necessarily serve us anymore, then we can get a different story. We're creative, imaginative beings. We have support all around us. We can look to Scripture for inspiration. We can look to Unity. Rather, train yourself in godliness comes out of 1 Timothy. And then our co-founder, Charles Fillmore, says, out of omnipresent substance, those are the divine ideas that are everywhere and accessible to us all the time. Out of omnipresent substance, your mind forms whatever it wants by the power of imagination. Pretty amazing how we can write and rewrite stories in our lives. I want to tell you a story that is true. And I think even though we may not be 30 years old, but maybe you are, but most of us are not 30 years old, we can relate to that. It's about a young woman at the age of 30 who takes a new job in a new town. She goes to this new town that she's not really sure that she likes the city environment. She is hired in a job that she's not sure she's going to like. She rents an apartment that's a little bit above her price range. And after a few nights in this apartment, sleeping on the mattress, which is on the floor because she couldn't afford to buy any furniture, she discovers the apartment is infested with fleas. So she grabs all her clothes, she finds a laundromat that's right near her office, and she puts the clothes in the washer. She goes to work, and an hour later she goes back to the laundromat, she moves the clothes from the washer to the dryer, and then an hour after that she goes back to the laundromat and her clothes were stolen. She just walks dejectedly back to her office. She's sitting in her cubicle, and she has her head in her hands. And she wonders how this can happen and what this means. And then she has an aha moment. She starts to realize that 10 years prior, her parents had died. And she had experienced some very difficult times and crises after that. And yet here again, she was in another crisis. And she started tracing back her thoughts, her events, the ideas that she was holding, and the story that she was telling herself. And she realized that at the time of her parents' death, she created an affirmation for herself. And the affirmation was, I am strong. I can handle any crisis. And so over those 10 years, not only did she demonstrate her strength and her independence, but she was demonstrating over and over and over again that she could handle any crisis. And so unconsciously, she was creating crisis. She was putting herself into crisis situations so she could prove once again how strong she was. What a story. So right there in her office, she just said, I live in a life that's full of grace and ease. And things settled in her body. She knew she was onto something. I live a life that is full of grace and ease. She took out a piece of paper and she started writing down what her life was going to be like because she was now living in grace and ease. And she started writing down, I found a new wonderful place to live, no problem. I find new friends, no problem. I accept help from others when I need it, no problem. I accept help from people who aren't my family or my friends that are hundreds of miles away. I find new friends easily right where I am. So she finishes writing that and she feels so good when one of her coworkers pokes her head around the corner and says, how's it going? And the first thing that came up was, I better answer them, everything's fine. Great, great, everything's fine. And she caught herself. She said, oh, in my news story, things are graceful and full of ease. And she said, well, actually, things aren't going too good today. She told the coworker about her fleas, the laundromat, her worries, and the coworker said, well, no problem. I have a 2-bedroom, 2-bath apartment. Why don't you come and stay with me while you sort things out? So the woman did. She moved in with her, and she went back to her landlord. The landlord treated for fleas, but the treatment was unsuccessful, so she negotiated her way out of the lease. The coworker said, hey, we're getting to be friends. Why don't we live together? So in this life full of ease and grace, now the young woman has a place to live. She's beginning to get a new network of friends. Her whole outlook is vastly different because she decided to change her story. At the end, she says, my life turned around and got a lot easier. I had changed my story. I was no longer a strong person ready to handle crises. I was a person ready to accept help and gracefully blend into my new community. Rewriting our story is so powerful, it can feel like magic. Just take the wand, make some words. But that's exactly how principle works. Take your wand, make some words. Create a new story that empowers you. Create a new story that enlivens you. Create a new story that gives you access to resources you didn't even know you had. Write a new story that brings you joy. Write a new story that helps you magnify that love that you have in your life. You are a master storyteller. Let's affirm that together. Oh, yes, right after we read this. As we write a new story that is more reflective of our essential self, we will both consciously and unconsciously begin to make decisions and act in ways that are consistent with that story. Isn't that what I just said?
Yes.
Yes, okay, good. Let's affirm. I am a master storyteller. I am creative in thought and deed. I am writing a new, magnificent story for my life. How does that feel? How does that feel? We get to go out, we can do the same old things, but we have a new story to go with those same old things. We can go out, we can do new and different things because we have a new story to go with those new and different things. We are the common denominator. We are the theme of success. We're incredibly powerful. We're incredibly beautiful. We let go of our past and celebrate who we've become. Let's do it again. I am a master storyteller. I am creative in thought and deed. I am writing a new, magnificent story for my life. Karen Drucker has some wonderful words, so let's sing them together as we integrate our storytelling